Hello and welcome to Know Before You Go. For the fifth Sunday in Ordinary Time, I'm Father Scott Steinkerchner, and this is a service of the Dominicans of the province of St. Albert the Great, USA, Chicago. We have some interesting readings today, of course, and they have a theme of life being somewhat of drudgery. And it starts with Job, who Job says, "Is not man's life on earth a drudgery?" And it goes on from there, as you'd expect. And then Paul in 1 Corinthians says, "If I preach the gospel, that's no reason for me to boast, for an obligation has been imposed on me, and woe to me if I do not preach it." And then in the gospel, Jesus is healing everyone. He's over at Simon Peter's house and the whole town shows up. So you'd think it'd be very joyous, but 'tis a bit much. And so early in the morning, the next day before the dawn, Jesus sneaks out to a deserted place to be alone so he can pray. And his disciples come to him and say, "Everyone's looking for you." And he says, "No, let's go. Let's go somewhere else." It's a bit much. So life really can be a bit much sometimes. A drudgery. Things that should bring us joy even don't. But what do these readings really saying to us besides whining about that? Well, when Job says life is drudgery, it wasn't always so for him, right? Job was rich and he had a family, and then the devil made a deal with God saying, "Well, you know, he only likes you because he's rich. Strike him and he'll curse you to your face." And so God says, "You're wrong about him, but give it a try. Don't hurt him, but do your worst." And so the devil kills his family, takes away everything he owns, so Job is poor and alone. And that's when he says life is a drudgery. And he goes on to this: "My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle. They come to an end without hope. Remember that my life is like the wind. I shall not see happiness again." What's the point to living, right? His days go so fast and then they're gone like the wind. And then Job's friends have come to cheer him up. No, well, to support him. And they tell him, "Look, you must have sinned for God to do this to you. So just repent, make some burnt offerings to God, throw yourself at God's mercy, and everything will be okay again." And Job is saying, "No, I did not sin. That is not true." And so then he comes out with this, and then his friend Bildad the Shuhite tells him, "Your words are like a mighty wind." That is, you're a blowhard. Everything you're saying, it comes and it goes, and none of it matters a thing. You think your life doesn't matter, your words don't matter. You must have sinned, or your children must have sinned, because God would not let this happen otherwise. Job sticks to what he knows to be true, and God eventually rewards him with a vision of God's very self. And then in the end, even though he says, "I shall not see happiness again," Job is happy because God gives him even more riches and more children than he had before. So then we get to the gospel. Jesus healing people, but it's so overwhelming. But there's this interesting part of the healing. The whole town was gathered at the door. He cured many who were sick with various diseases, and he drove out many demons, not permitting them to speak because they knew him. Now, silencing demons is part of the exorcism, right? You bind them so that you can throw them out, but not binding them because they knew him. That's an addition that seems to be part of, in the Gospel of Mark, what's called the messianic secret. Often Jesus doesn't want people to know that he is the Messiah. Yes, you're right, but don't tell anyone. Why? Maybe he's waiting for the day, maybe they'll misunderstand. There's lots of theories about it. But this seems to be part of that. But if we look closely, it makes a distinction about that messianic secret. Because then Jesus, when his disciples find him the next morning, everyone is looking for you, they say. And so he says, let us go on to the nearby villages, that I may preach there also. For this purpose have I come. So he went into their synagogues, preaching and driving out demons throughout the whole of Galilee. He's hardly keeping secret. He's not hiding anything. He's preaching and healing throughout Galilee. So what is this messianic secret? Oh, well, he doesn't want people told who he is, you see. His healing is a prophetic symbol of who he is. And he wants people to figure that out, the people who were healed. So how do you think he could heal you? Or people who see the healings. So how do you think this can be? Right, he must be the anointed one. You get it? Not that you heard it from a demon, not that you heard it from someone else, that you saw what was happening, you honestly confronted it and came to the conclusion of what was true. That is what Job stuck to in the first reading. People say, well, it must be this explanation, it must be that, it must be that. And his friends go through all of the explanations about why good people suffer. And none of them are true. And in the end, God condemns them for speaking ill about him and promotes Job because Job was honest. He spoke the truth about God. He held to the truth. So when we get to Paul's reading in 1 Corinthians, Paul says, although I am free in regard to all, I have made myself a slave to all, so as to win over as many as possible. To the weak I became weak, to win over the weak. I have become all things to all, to save at least some. Paul makes himself a slave to others so that he can enter their world as an equal and speak to them on their level, so that then they can decide for themselves if his words are true. He doesn't stand above them speaking as God himself. He says, no, like you, but this is what I've seen, this is what I know, now you decide for yourself. So I think that that's the theme of these readings. There's lots of people who will tell you to believe a lot of things. Think for yourself. Open your eyes and see for yourself. Open your heart and feel for yourself. And figure out for yourself what is true. And in particular, what is true about God's love and care for the world. Life is sometimes a drudgery. There are signs that make us wonder. But don't dismiss the signs or dismiss God. Look more deeply for the deeper truth, and you will find it. That's the promise of the good news. So God be with you in that task this week.